Welcome everybody to our Sacred Self-Healing Training Call. And today's topic is True Heart's Desire. True Heart's Desire. There is obviously a lot in that. It's part of the karmic manifestation series. Here's a topic for 2022 that's extremely important. Yeah, the investigation. How do we manifest? What's blocking our manifestation? What do we even want to manifest? And that's basically part of today's call, all of it together, namely, first and foremost, diving a little deeper into what's the difference between an intention and a desire, and all the different levels of desiring, then the levels of manifestation that correspond to the levels of desire. And then the whole sort of purpose of investigating this, the purpose of knowing what you want, and also the consequences of not knowing what you want, congruent or incongruent, conscious or unconscious, are fundamentally the energy aspects of this topic. And if we still have the time, depending on your guys' participation in question and all that, I do want to mention a few things about manifestation timeline cycles that has to do with the dynamics of manifestation that only a very few people are actually familiar with, and not to minimize any publications that are out there, but the publications such as The Secret, for example, I want to send this up front, have led to collectively misunderstanding the manifestation process. And we will, at the end of this call, we'll know why The Secret it really isn't something that you could use as an instruction manual. Now, just real quick here, just out of curiosity, how many of you have or are even familiar with The Secret? I don't want to make it about this, but I just want to know that if I mention it, if you guys even know what I'm talking about. It's something that became very, very popular at the beginning of the 2000s. Basically, also sort of Tony Robbins and that sort of kind of talk. Most mental coaching is based on, sort of the power of will, the power of affirmation. And that's something that so many aspects of New Age, from my perspective, have transfigured and really sent people to the wrong exit, because they basically talk a lot about, true heart's desire, but really don't mean that. And for me, at this point, I don't want to go deeper into this, but I want to point out that there's a difference here. So just willing something really hard is not actually how we can tap into our true heart's desire. It is definitely recommendable to know what it is that you want, so that your energies are more focused, or your whole vision is more focused. And yes, affirmations do have a place in that, but that is not the way we can actually sort of set the course for fulfillment and happiness. At best, we can get sort of to what we will, okay, or what we think we want, and can force that to a certain degree. But it's not a guarantee that we are actually tapping into what makes us happy or what fulfills us. And obviously, there's a lot of questions in regards to why is it so hard to manifest and so forth, because I am sure that many of you here, just like myself, have been trying to tap into this. And yeah, so it's the majority of you who know The Secret. Like I said, I don't want to go deeper into it. Yes, Sheila, it was recommended to you by a friend, but you haven't read it yet. Well, look at it as a sort of mainstream cheapo spirituality, okay, that basically sends people into the wrong direction, like so many of the New Age publications. So my tip for you is, if you consume such literature that basically tells you to go harder and do more, that you really feel into this and that you really investigate for you if that is what feels true to you. All right, that would just be my, yes, it's all externalized, Cindy. I agree with you. Externalized is an energy lingo term and hard to understand for a lot of people. But maybe at the end of this webinar, it'll be more clear to you why I made these kind of comments. Now, I would like to know from you guys what your sort of impression of your own manifestation process is, and what you have experienced, also maybe the struggles that you have for or with tapping into what you truly want. I would love to hear from you guys, so where you guys are at, yeah, and you know, sort of what you also what you experience as sort of the biggest roadblocks, maybe. Who wants to share? Yes, thank you, Sheila. You are very thankful for this training here. I love that. So what are some of the things that you have come across that you know, are either, you know, fascinating or difficult about your manifestation process? I know some of you have phenomenal manifestation powers, and you do once in a while like really hit that sweet spot. And do you guys know what I'm talking about? And you don't even know how it happened. And then for the most part, you know, you struggle to get to somewhere. So let me read what you're saying. Just so you guys know, speaking into a microphone really saves time. So sometimes it's actually much better for all of us if you just speak. Here, Sheila says, sorry, don't think I can get, oh, you can't get your microphone to work. So basically sheer willing something that isn't something that works for you. Yes, exactly. And we'll discover why. Yes, Linda is sharing that she isn't really sure about what she wants. And that's very, very common, Linda, just so you know. In fact, I want to say that that's probably the most common reason why people never really get, quote unquote, anywhere as far as like fulfillment and happiness is concerned, because they don't really know where to find that. Yeah, so you're in good company. But who of you has actually maybe accidentally tapped into like this sort of flow, you know, like where things just so seem to magically happen, and where you you know, sort of didn't even know what you did in order to make this happen? Who of you has reference feelings for that? Like for when things are in a flow, when things just go really, really easy, almost to a point where, you know, you don't really know how you did this.
I can talk a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I can talk on both aspects, some very, very intentional and some just kind of like floating on top of me like a bunch of feathers falling from the sky. Yeah, not knowing exactly how. That one is easy for me to pinpoint, and what I can tell you is just it's like a non-thinking way of, I can tell you what I would always resort to would be to say that it was an act of spirit. Yeah.
Okay.
The reason
why
like
that
God's
happened. Mysterious ways. That's all right.
Yeah,
That's all right.
Yeah. But when I have the ability to slow down and be intentional, I've never really put words to this very well. I've been asked many times, so I'll try to slow down my process. And one of the first things that I can mention is it's almost like goal setting, but it's not. It really isn't the same, but it's similar in terms of, you know, coming up with something that I really want. Yeah. And it's not always want. Sometimes you ask for something, but you don't get what you want, you get what you need. We all kind of know that already. But when it comes to being intentional, really focusing in, I tune in on not just the object or the outcome, but I do definitely very clearly make that in my mind the outcome that I desire. And as opposed to taking action steps like we do with goal setting, it's more like intentional thinking about it and bringing my own level of energy into it. It's like a vibrational frequency. It's a match to the vibration. But that is said in The Secret, which is why I hesitate to say it out loud, because it does sound woo-woo. However, there's truth to that, yeah? If I try and go for something that I'm not in alignment with, it's not going to happen. Or it does, but it takes me like 5 years, 10 years.
Or it happens in ways that you didn't actually want. You didn't want it that way. You know, you wanted it another way.
Very true. Very true.
So it does happen for a lot of people. Actually, what they will does happen. It's just that they didn't really see the bigger picture of it. You know, just think of situations where you really wanted somebody to fall in love with you. And 5 years later, you try to get out of that relationship.
Yeah, that's a terrible example.
Because you found out that this guy was really abusive, you know? So it's like, well, you kind of got what you wanted. And you just ask yourself, why is that something I needed? But alignment is obviously a huge factor. And these words vibrational match are not incorrect.
Yes. For the first step that I do, after that, I engage myself. And what I do is I guess I'll call it a little mind trick I do with myself. Every time I touch a doorknob, this is my thing, or go through the threshold of a door, I engage myself. I use that as a trigger to allow myself to start noticing what I'm noticing. What am I paying attention to? And you know how the mind has a tendency to wander, yeah? When I'm wandering around, when I go through that threshold or touch a doorknob, I make sure that that's a direct intention to gear my mind back towards thinking about what it is that I am desiring to manifest. There's so much more to it. But
yes, but it's very beautiful, Heather, because you know, that's you know, a wonderful example for present moment awareness and really making the unconscious conscious. And at the end of the day, you know, especially those of you who've been around here for a while, you hear me say this over and over and over again. Everything is about present moment awareness, because manifestation actually happens in the now. All right, which means it's all about you being aware of what it is that you're doing, that you're thinking, that you're emoting, that you're wishing, and also what meaning and purpose you give things. Yeah, all of that has to come into alignment, and we'll see that there is so much more to manifestation than just, you know, like it being appropriate. Say, like if you want to be the richest person in the world, but you were born into poverty and you don't really have like sort of an entrepreneurial type of inclination, yeah, and you're not an inventor and you're not an artist, you're just a normal person, you know, there's a misalignment here with that. Not that it doesn't mean that you can't be the or can't become the richest person in the world, but you have to ask yourself, like, why? You know, the meaning of that and the purpose of that. What would that do for you? Right? And when we go into that level of manifestation, we recognize that alignment can sometimes be something very practical, something very feasible or tangible, and sometimes also something that just simply comes from us not being aware of why we even want something. Yeah, why do we want that? So Heather, it's wonderful that you brought in this little exercise with the doorknob and the door frame. There is indeed some manifestation power in that. It's not so much actually the sort of esoteric meaning of doorknob or door frame. It is the fact that you are actually using those outer cues as an inner cue to be more conscious in this moment. That is what basically then forms your manifestation currency. Yeah, the more conscious we are as sort of an exercise of discipline, the more likely we are to detect misalignments, yeah, incongruencies, yeah, things that simply don't match, yeah, and let's say distortions or distractions. So that's fundamentally the most important tool to find anything like a course or path, or something that you can sort of call a true heart's desire. That's a vital tool for that. Thank you for sharing that. Sheila is sharing, I can relate to what Heather is saying. A really cool way to describe this. For me, it seems connected to an intentional, with a step-by-step feeling, which each part of the movement toward that larger thing, for the lack of better words. Yeah. So this is why it's hard for me to read your guys' things, because sometimes there's issues with grammar or whatever, or when when it gets complex, it's hard for me to give it the right expression. Like, I'm not sure, Sheila, if I'm expressing this correctly, what you're writing here. But what I hear you say is that you go into like a step-by-step type of process with this, where you see different parts of it, and make sure that these parts or these steps, that they are still moving you toward your goal. Which, yeah, like, please correct me if I misinterpreted this. But if that is what okay, this is what you wanted to say, then that is another really, really good tip for everybody present here, because a lot of people actually, once they start becoming more aware of what it is that they want, and like what it's supposed to feel like, and where they want it, and what the meaning and purpose for them is, kind of get distracted on the way, and then sort of start going off on tangents, or start getting distracted. Like, say, in relationships, this happens very, very frequently. Get distracted by like, say, the other partner's goal. Yeah, the partner's goal, like the or what comes in sort of as outer condition. The last 2 years, pandemic time, for example, was a really, really good example for how we could get distracted. And we could argue that there is a karmic purpose to that, because if you really, really look at what happened here the last 2 years, and you probably know this because I talk about this all the time, it forced us to do certain things, and these things that we were forced to be doing, or to be contemplating about, or to be reviewing, they all had to do with our true heart's desire to a certain degree, because some of these most fundamental things that we take for granted, like giving people a hug, shaking hands, being together, having meals together, celebrating holidays together, going out together, they were impeded, or still are, for some of us. So that forced us, yeah, through kind of like an outer condition, to go inward, and to double check if on one hand, if our goals are still what we truly want, and if they're even feasible, if this is even possible right now, and if the step that I'm trying to take right now is still adequate, or if that is still possible, and if not, what alternative steps can be taken, and are these still leading me toward this, or have my goals changed now? Who of you experienced something like that, that your, I want to say your priorities almost, but maybe also your values, have shifted a little bit over the last 2 years?
I even found that it sort of allowed me to see some boundaries that I didn't know I needed. But when I couldn't make the connection, they were truly blessings to see the value of not having some of those connections.
You mean like the ones that are actually not good for you? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
And I
so
didn't know how
how
valuable it
freeing it
was
is.
to lose it. Yeah.
How freeing that is if you don't have to socialize with a lot of people or people that you didn't choose. Or yeah, that's interesting. That's cool, Linda. Thank you for sharing that. That's actually really cool because that did happen for many of us. Yeah, that is certain unnecessary things or things that weren't really authentic to us, that they kind of, it gave us an opportunity to kind of get rid of them. Yeah, or just not invest in them because we weren't really, in the situation to be doing this anyways. Yeah, and Julian, you're right. It also forced us to recognize false beliefs. Now, in what way did you recognize false beliefs in you? What kind of false beliefs did you uncover? Hi there.
For me, it was how I actually viewed myself and things I was telling myself simply, oh, you're not good enough, or you can't do that, and actually believing it. And as soon as I woke up in the moment, oh, hang on, that's a part of me, a voice that's not even true. What if I don't choose to even feel like that? And it's like chucking those beliefs out, catching them as they come forward. Just a recent example, I got my driver's license and I'm 54 and I've never driven, and I didn't realize how many unconscious beliefs I had that blocked me from getting my license. So,
well, they lasted 54 years or like 30 years.
And I'm like, and then, oh, you're too old. Oh, my brain doesn't work like that. Oh, the road's too full of people. I haven't learnt, from a young age to have the experience. I'll have an accident, all this stuff. And I actually realised, oh my God, a couple of days before I was going to do my test, I was really nervous and I had insomnia, and I was thinking, oh, I'm just not going to do this. I'll fail. And I stopped to myself right there, and a feeling came in of just light and love, of feeling happy and light. And it was like, oh, how does it feel? Congratulations, you've got your light. How good would it feel? And I could feel my energy attaching to the freedom and the love and the joy of how wonderful it would be to experience in this lifetime.
Yes, I mean, on a long enough timeline, right? You will probably get it.
Yeah, being able to drive. And then right there, right in that moment, I went, oh my God. I caught the actual schism in my energy field of everything that was blocking me and everything I told myself, which was huge roadblocks in my energy. And I just chose to focus on how good it would feel, how wonderful it was, and that it's okay even if I did fail, but I can do it again anyway. And it's just like, go and have fun, go and do it. And the day I went for my test, a new instructor arrived who was totally lovely, because there's only 3 in Cairns and they're pretty tough. This guy was new. My driving instructor grabbed my arm and goes, oh my God, Julianne, this is a new guy. He just started this week. I don't know what he's like. And that morning I had actually done like a bit of an affirmation of like, the person that's going to give me my test, I'm going to connect with them and just see them in love and light, just see them as a soul, and not, what we would project onto someone, a strict, mean, horrible person. Well, that would be my projection of what I would think. Oh my God, there's somebody who's going to test me, which already makes me feel shaky inside, that somebody's going to judge or test me. And I'm like, oh my God, they're all my false beliefs. And I just kept chucking them away and realigning my energy to the feeling of freedom that finally I got my license. Yeah. So that was just
why you even do it, right? The purpose and meaning of it, and you focused your energy on that instead of all the things that could go wrong, or whatever the projections are. Now, do you think that the last 2 years have contributed to that, or is that just a general observation that you have? Do you think that you know the last the pandemic years? Well, you guys in Australia had that a little delayed, so you kind of like going through it now still.
Yeah, Christmas
You
time,
know,
really.
like a year later, more or less than other people, other folks. But since we talked about like how these last 2 years forced us to be doing certain things and how it brought new insights. Do you think it's related to that, or is that just a general observation that you have?
It's hard to say. It's sort of both, because it feels like, wow, we really have to get out and do stuff now. I really want to achieve stuff now. It feels like a pathway has been cleared for the new to arrive. So because the world has changed so much, it does feel like it's a new beginning. It's like we can create from a new and create new energy, but also it does feel a bit old, because I'm like, when I've noticed manifestation in my life, it has come as a surprise, and afterwards looking back, I can see where I was in flow with just my heart's desire, my love, and the feeling of freedom something would bring. It's not like it's consciously done in the moment. It's been afterwards I've been able to look back and go,
Julianne,
oh my.
I actually had you guys, I've known Julianne for a long, long time, like almost, I say 10 years, right, that we've known each other. And I actually had you in mind when I asked if any of you has like these spouts of like mysterious magical manifestations and then like sort of long dry, you know, long draughts of manifestation. I actually had you in mind because you were one of these examples who can magically manifest stuff like out of nowhere, okay, and then sit there for 2 years and you know, like with the driver's license, right, and sabotage yourself with the simplest things, you know. And that's maybe, you know, the COVID time here has led to you realizing that, well, you know, life isn't going to be served to you on a silver platter. You know, if the mountain doesn't come to you, well, maybe you have to get to the mountain then, and the car goes faster than walking.
And it feels like that. It feels like a big breakthrough realization. Like it's sort of like it's always been there, right? And I can look back, and then I go unconscious again, and it's like, oh my God, wake up! How many times? And it's the alignment. It's my own
but
alignment.
It's also the meaning and purpose, and you brought that in here you described this very beautifully. You know, like instead of going into your fear, instead of, sorry guys, there's an airplane right above me right now. Instead of focusing on the fear or all the things that could go wrong, you disciplined your own mind and your emotion to focus on why you're doing this, and not like why as in the reason, but as in you know, the feeling. You reminded yourself why you want this. And here is where some of you need to be very, very careful, because you think you know why, and you think that it's a good reason, whatever your reason is. For example, and I've said this many times, but you know, it can't be mentioned often enough. Somebody that fictitious person that I mentioned earlier, you know, who was born into poverty and wants to become the richest person in the world. Do you think that this person has a good reason to wanting to become a rich person? Having been born into poverty, and probably also having experienced all the negative aspects or the negative you know, experiences that come with poverty. You don't think so, Cindy? Would you like to talk about this? So you don't think that it's a good for someone who comes from poverty to wish or to want to become rich? Why?
See, I would say it's driven by fear of not wanting to be poor. So it's an unconscious. It's not a good jumping board for manifestation, because it's coming from a place of fear, and the manifestation that comes from the fears.
If it does, that
Yes.
is what needs to be investigated.
Mm.
And to explain this a little more here. So there is a certain level of desire, guys, and this is here fundamentally what we need to learn today. There are different levels of manifestation, different, or almost like frequency levels, if you will, but let's just, you know, call it dimensions. Some want to call it. It's all correct, but it kind of leads the mind astray. Let's just stick with these 5 fundamental levels of looking at, you know, who we are. Okay, the levels of being, which is physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and energetic. Yeah, that's, you know, 2 more dimensions than most other people define our existence. Yeah, so we're adding the spiritual and the energetic to it. All right, so on a physical level, physical would be, with this fictitious person, would be, you know, the owning, having, getting, and all the sort of the sensual aspect of that, right? Like, say, you know, having a warm house instead of having to freeze because you can't afford heating, having a full belly as opposed to, you know, falling asleep hungry because you don't have any means to get food. Do you guys know what I mean? That's one level of looking at, you know, a certain desire. That's a very fundamental level of desire. And you guys know where that comes from, right? Where does the level of the physical level of desire come from? As in, like, where does it originate? Yes, it's part of our survival instinct. And where does the survival instinct, well, I just said it, but where does survival originate? Do we think, oh, I need to survive, I need to survive, I need to survive every second? No.
Instinct?
It's instinct, yeah. So it's basically, you know, it's basically in us. You could say that it's part of our mammal coding. Yeah, it's DNA and learned or conditioned behavior, but it is, you know, a combination of all 3. Yeah, so there's our nervous system, there's our sensory system, our you know, coded instincts as humans, and then something that has more to do with, like, just how mammals do that. Yeah, because all mammals fundamentally have the same needs, same physical needs. Yeah. So yes, that's correct, Cindy. It's on the level of safety and security, and mostly survival is mostly first chakra. Yeah. So that's not something that we think about, right? We don't think I need to survive, and we just do that. Yeah. Do we agree on that? Yeah. That when you're in that mode, when your physical survival is triggered, there is no will, there is no intention, and there is no conscious thinking involved. In fact, it's designed that way. Because if we start thinking about survival, we may die in the process. So it needs to work without our brain. And there's like massive sort of neural connections that make sure that our brain is actually not involved in this. Yeah, we're not thinking, oh, I need to take a breath so that my lungs have enough air. We don't need to do this consciously. Yes, and it's correct, Heather. Survival is always linked to fear emotionally. Yeah, so the physical needs, the physical level of desire has to do with, well, not feeling pain. Yeah, physical pain. Yeah, does this make sense? Yeah, shelter, food, clothing, you know, like feeling safe. Yeah, not getting eaten or bitten or beaten up, right? That's all physical. That's pure physical, pure instinctual level of desire. With it also actually is the sex drive. The sex drive is pure instinctual, guys. Yeah, that's for the survival of our species. Okay. Not to be confused with the emotional desiring. So what's emotional desiring? Okay, so the guy, the fictitious guy, the example that we're going through here, you know, comes from poverty, has a lot of negative experiences as a child. A lot of nights where he had to go to bed hungry, a lot of nights where he didn't even have a bed, a lot of pain, you know, whatever, you know, I don't want to go too graphic here, but whatever can happen if you don't even have shelter. It's a lot of things that can happen, and they create a lot of pain. So this person has a pain memory stored in him. He has experienced what it's like not to have these things. And the desire that comes out of that is obviously what, and here Heather comes in, the fear comes in. The desire that originates in the physical and the instinctual is all about not wanting that to happen. So basically the fear of that ever happening again. Yeah, so you were correct. Yeah, Julianne, there's a problem with that, because if you focus too much on that, then you obviously kind of just steering all your manifestation thoughts and energies and emotions into what you don't want. Do you guys get that? This gets particularly difficult with emotional desire, because emotional desire is a level up, but you know, these levels, they all build upon. So the emotional level also includes the physical. Yeah, the emotional level is the level of belongingness, like wanting to belong to a tribe, to a peer group, to a family, you know, like companionship. And that's something that a lot of us often confuse, and you know, media and collective programming basically steering us into that direction, getting all this mixed up in the sense that we have tied certain pleasures, like such as food and consumerism and so forth, to this. So now we have all this emotional desire mixed up with our physical instincts, yeah, and the need or the desire to wanting to conform, to belong to, like, say, you know, the family or the village, or you know, whatever we are like basically deem as the group of belonging that can give us safety. So these two, physical is mostly about physical safety, and the emotional desire is mostly about emotional safety, and that is something that is still very, very instinctual, and often both go hand in hand. People can't really distinguish them. Yeah, so when they think that they are in love, a lot of times it really isn't about love. Yeah, it is about the belongingness, about, you know, getting married, having kids, and therefore getting, say, the validation from you know, the family, or you know, the parents, or you guys know what I mean. So emotional desire is still based on the past, but it's not the thoughts of the past, really, because it's hardwired. So a lot of times, and this is why trauma can be so detrimental to our manifestation process, guys, the physical and emotional are hardwired. And we don't like to hear this, but a lot of our emotional states are actually physiological states. So it's a complex interplay between, you know, our five senses and neurotransmitters and hormones and nutrition and so forth, right? Now, that said, it doesn't mean that it's all an illusion, but it is very instinctual. It's not very conscious, guys. Yeah. So that's why psychology operates mostly on that level, because most of the behaviors that come with that, the behavioral patterns, are completely unconscious to us. Yeah, on this level, because the higher thinking isn't really involved. Now, the thoughts about the past and the thoughts about the future, they are determined by something else, and that has to do with identity. That has to do with, you know, how we see ourselves through the eyes of others, how we fit into our social group. That too, guys, I know it's disappointing to hear that, but it's mostly instinctual and sort of bred into our epigenetics. Yeah, like this is how we have to act as humans. Yeah, this idea that being human means, that we have to do certain things and we need certain rules and disciplines. They all play on that mental level. Yeah, like the 10 Commandments and so forth. So if you think back to Neanderthal times, for example, the physical emotional is basically what reigned those human subspecies until the prefrontal cortex developed and a higher sort of thinking function, a higher cognitive function arose in us that allowed us to think about what it is that we're doing. So it isn't until we actually start thinking about what it is that we're doing, and sort of double checking on this and asking ourselves questions such as authenticity questions or, self-reflect, we will pretty much go with what everybody else does. Yeah, it's that sort of herd instinct that we all have. It's a fail-safe. And that plays into our mental, into our cognition. And there is a sort of an engine that can turn on if we exercise it, that can allow us to go into the deeper levels of that can allow us to actually realize, for example, something that we just shared. If my desire is based on trying to avoid or prevent something from happening, let's say something that has happened to me in the past, the moment where I felt so ashamed that I was, that I made that commitment to myself that I would never ever, get into that kind of embarrassing situation again. And the way I will want to do that, I will want to accomplish that, is by becoming rich or by getting a PhD or by becoming the world's best bricklayer or, something like that. So these are third chakra identity things that have to do with willpower. So you make a decision out of your willpower, and that is a higher function compared to instincts, but it is still something that can be completely unconscious to us until we actually turn on the higher thinking engine in us, where we go into the meta level with that, where we start investigating why we want something and if that is actually truly bringing us where we want. So that is, typically what we call a spiritual. So with the spiritual comes the higher thinking and, the looking at things from a slightly different perspective that allows us to determine whether what we do even has meaning, whether it even serves the purpose. And that's then, if you think religion, for example, also in the course of human evolution, the role that religion has played in the beginning of time, or at least sort of what we know from scripture, religion merely served as a sort of mental intervention. It brought sort of the 10 Commandments and rules of how we are supposed to live together. Just so that becomes possible, that not, everybody steals everybody's food and rapes everybody's wife and stuff like that. So that was an accomplishment, to have these social rules, and that it came through, the humans actually starting to see, oh, there's got to be more to life than just survival. There was something like a mission or something like a higher purpose, and that's then what allowed us to develop all these other higher intellectual functions and spiritual seeking, which I think anthropologists agree on that, provided the main cue for us humans to actually develop these higher cognitive functions. And it's very interesting because they have detected these the desire to spiritually connect with purpose, or like some kind of higher power, in cave dwellings, I think as old as 480,000 BC. So that is a really deep insight into the human nature and our potential. Yeah, so even if life is very raw and very sort of Neanderthalish, okay, there was still sort of the seed for that in us already, and it took, well, almost 500,000 years, or no, well, not quite, 400,000 years for us to develop that. And we are now standing at a level where we're actually beginning to become more aware of things such as energies and vibrations. And that is, for many of you, it's kind of old hat. But when it comes to like daily energy management, most of you are still at a loss because you're not fully identifying the differences between your physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and energetic states. Okay. And while that sounds so tricky or complex when I break it down that way, at the end of the day, it's like driving a car. So Julianne, I don't know if you remember the first driving lesson you had. I remember mine. And that was extremely overwhelming. And I remember coming home to my boyfriend and I said, I'm never ever going to learn how to ride a car. There's too many things that you have to do, like clutch and gas and brake and gears and rear mirror and windscreen and side mirrors. And I'm never ever going to be able to do this. Because in the beginning, when you learn something, a new discipline or new behavior, and you break it down into all these different steps, yeah, then it seems overwhelming. At the end of the day, those of you who have a driver's license and who drive a car, you step in your car and you do not think about all these individual steps. You just do them because you've practiced them to a degree where it's possible for you to be fully present in the traffic, to think of, your dinner tonight and, do all sorts of other things while you're doing that. So it's the same with our consciousness. Our consciousness is not an altered state, guys. It's a more advanced, a more mature state of what we already have, who we already are. And so when we want to look at, our manifestation process and the mechanics of that, we really have to differentiate our desire in that way. Yeah, where does my desire come from? On what level of manifestation does this desire, well, I could say vibrate. Really what I mean is like, what is it aligned to? So meaning and purpose is obvious, and all the historical development to it that. But what about resonance? What about harmony? How do we know that something is in harmony with who we are? And that's where it gets tricky for most of us, right? Who would like to share? How do you know if things are in resonance? Or Heather, as you brought up the terminology, if we are encountering or if we're dealing with or if we're striving for like a vibrational match, how do we know that? How can we verify that?
I can share a little bit. So when I'm in the flow and things come easily and I'm not aligned to lack of any kind, lack of time, lack of money, and it's really tuned into my true heart's desire. And I just do whatever. It's not even a do thing. It's I make a choice.
How do you feel if you are following your true heart's desire? How do you know that?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
How do you know that you're following your true heart's desire? I mean, this is what this whole talk is about. So we're trying to break it down into like really knowing what we're doing.
I can feel it in my heart. I can feel it.
Good.
Yeah. Even if my ego is saying there is no way that you can do that, you're out of your mind, blah, blah, blah. When my heart overrides that, and I can feel those higher resonances, the love, the peace, the joy, That's when I know I'm into my true heart's desire.
Now, let me ask you something. Is that you just described this, and I think in the English language we would call this a feeling, right? It's a feeling. You can feel it. Resonance.
Yeah, and it goes
Resonance is
against
something you feel.
everything my mind and ego
Okay.
tells me. Yeah.
In a very schismatic person, that is the case. In you, that is the case, and most of us, that is the case. But I do want to point out that there are states that even you can be in, Cindy, where it's not necessarily contradicting, yeah, you know, what you hear in your mind. Okay, so the more practice we have in actually being in harmony with ourselves and having that all balanced out, the less of that inner resistance we feel. But the truth is, most of us, you know, experience ourselves in our own dualisms and in our own schisms, in these like inner conflictions, you know, about things, where we constantly hear this voice. You called it your critical inner voice, I think, right? Keeps telling you, you know, what you're supposed to do, or why, you know, questioning what you're doing, or why you haven't done it yet, you know, or that you're not doing it fast enough or not good enough or whatnot, right?
Exactly.
So that's all part of our inner schisms and our inner battle. But when something is in resonance, then there is something like a feeling, and that informs you that there is something deeper there. Now, we need to define the word feeling, because in the English language, as non-English speaker, this comes to my attention, that in the English language, the word feeling can be used, or has many different meanings, and that it is not necessarily only referring to emotional, but also overall type of perceptions. Yeah, so feeling is actually a word that describes a certain kind of perception. It does not mean, in its original meaning, yeah, or it's not reduced to emotions, but most people use it in context with emotions. But since you used the word feeling, I wanted to ask you how you feel this. Where do you feel it? How do you know this? And I know it's super, super hard to describe this, guys, but this is exactly the kind of work that you need to be doing with yourself. How do I know that this resonates with me? What's my reference feeling for when things are in full sort of harmony with me?
For me, it's there's an absoluteness about it. It's an absolute feeling. It is really hard to put words to it. There's no questioning. There's zero question. It's a very expansive, loving state.
I like that.
And
yeah.
Every concern that I've had about it, or it's like nothing matters. It you know, what's the problem?
Okay, so I think most of everybody can follow Cindy here, but let's be absolutely clear. How long does this state last, typically?
Ooh, not very long.
Like a split second, right?
Yeah, it's
But
there is no mistake about it, though. Even if it's that split second. Yeah, they're fleeting, very fleeting.
Yes. This is very important for all of you to understand, because when you read this kind of stuff or hear other people talk about it, it sounds like, oh, these people are so wise, they have it all figured out, and there are always, and no, guys, something is in resonance with you, and you can consciously detect something like something similar to what Cindy just described. It will not be more than a fraction of a second that you experience that. Yeah, sometimes I call it the whispers of a true self, or I mean, there's all kinds of poetry around this, but it's a very subtle type of perception. And that's why we call it feeling, because it's really, really hard to describe it and to pin it down. But it is something, and we all have this, guys. We all have this inner compass. We have an inner reference for that, for when that occurs. The only problem is that most of you haven't really fully designed, oh God, what's the word? Not, you haven't really determined that yet. So there is a feeling in you guys, in all of you, each and every one of you, that can inform you whether you are thinking or visualizing or in the presence of something that deeply, deeply resonates with you. The only problem with that is just because it does resonate doesn't necessarily mean what your mind makes of it. Now, Cindy, since I just had you here, have you ever followed something in you that you felt such a strong resonance with? I think you've described it as beyond any doubt. Yeah. And it turned out to be a disaster. Or not maybe disaster, but you know, like something that,
Resonance?
yeah, where you followed that, thinking that this is it. This is, you know, I don't know, like, this is the job of my dreams, or this is the house of my dreams, or this is the partner of my dreams, or this is the place of my dreams. And then it turned out it wasn't.
Well, I've had relationships like that for sure. No question about that. That was all based on, it may have been, you know, higher desire, you know, higher.
So not like the physical or, you know, just sort of emotional stuff or even the mental
Yeah.
stuff. So there was some purpose and meaning there. And there was, would you say that the resonance that you felt, feeling, that it's still true?
No.
Okay.
There was, yeah, no.
What
I
was
wanted it to be.
You wanted it to be, okay.
School was the same thing in the very beginning. I was, even though I'm back in school now, but in the very beginning, I had this very cut path on how I wanted to do this, and this was going to fix everything. This was going to solve, you know, all of my financial or whatever problems, job problems. And even though once I got in there, it was, you know, super rewarding and super exciting, then that sort of flatlined too. It was like, that was great to change the direction, but that was not like my true heart's desire, even though I wanted it to be. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So sometimes the way this goes with resonances, and this is, I don't know if you guys can all see this, and Cindy, thank you for being our sort of real life practice person here for us. You know, there's several layers involved with this. Okay, so let's say you feel a resonance, but then you have a mind, and that mind can will things. It can make things out of it. It can give it meaning. It can interpret it in certain ways, and it can sort of, you know, basically promise you, you know, like in this case of going back to college, and it would solve all problems. All right. So in those kind of cases, and I know that many of you experience that, where the mentor takes over everything else. Yeah, that is typically where you guys get distracted, or where you get, of course. Why? Because you didn't investigate all these other levels of desire carefully enough. So basically what we need to do, yes, exactly, the ego then starts to latch on. And you know, when I say ego, it's obviously complex, but typically ego could be seen as sort of our solar plexus, our will, yeah, that wants to force things, that wants to make things so. And that is you know, something that is often driven by emotional or mental desires. Yeah, we want to have a higher social standing, more self-esteem, blah, 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 the way other people see us. And that is not necessarily wrong, but if that is something that supersedes, you know, the true meaning and purpose for us, yeah, or creates illusions around that, yeah, like for example, Prince Charming is a very typical of those illusions, yeah, or once I get married, everything is going to be fine and everything is going to resolve itself, you know, that you can hear this already by the way I'm saying this. This needs to be calibrated. We need to like make sure that we're not an illusion here. And while it is possible, obviously, that, and often also is the case that, you know, say when, you know, you have a partner, that some things are easier, yeah, but some things are also harder. That when you have a higher degree in something or more education, that some things are easier, but not necessarily guaranteed, and they don't necessarily lead you exactly where you want to go. Yeah, if I think of my own life, you know, I have like 3 different, entirely different careers, and each time, you know, involved with a degree and blah, blah, blah. And I thought this was it. And I really did believe that, guys. Yeah, just like you, Cindy. So there's nothing wrong with that. And at the end of the day, yeah, you know, like Sheila said, you know, at the end of the day, it's fine. It's a great learning experience. And I'm glad I did this. But I have to tell you the truth. You know, in my younger years, I was very conflicted about that because, you know, I started to question myself. I started to doubt my own ability to determine what it truly is that I want. Yeah. And that's where the way I'm kind of presenting this to you here, where you really take a moment to investigate that. What is actually the meaning and purpose of that? And with it also like the value and the priority it has in your life. And, you know, as these things also interact with another, yeah, a lot of my desires when I was younger were physical, like the guy that came out of poverty. Yeah, there was a bunch of things that I did not want to experience again. It was all sort of sensational, like it all had to do with certain memories and stuff that I didn't want to experience, pain that I didn't want to experience again. And the secondary motivation was always validation, you know, like not wanting to be alone, yeah, and not wanting to feel outcasted. Okay, so that for, like, I would say the first 30 years of my life, those were the primary levels of desire in which I operated. And I translated this into, like, you know, academic degrees and a lot of life experience, a lot of really cool career moves and moving around in the world and traveling the world and all that, you know, because it made me feel, you know, sort of better about myself, my identity, and my social standing. Yeah, until I had reached, you know, sort of some of the highest social standings, you know, not like royal state, but status, but, you know, something, you know, not too far below that, where I realized that this is not bringing any happiness or fulfillment. Yeah, and it wasn't until then that I fully allowed myself to investigate true purpose and meaning, and also the spiritual component of things. Yeah, and that is then when you know, it became aware to me that there are many different levels of resonances in me. Yeah, and that I need to pay very careful attention to that. So Sheila is commenting here, and actually Cindy, you said something as well that has to do with what it feels like when something is true. And I don't know if you noticed this, but here at the intro picture I put in a slide, oops, I don't know, it's a bit Yeah, truth is something that reminds of love, and that is kind of like a breadcrumb, a cue for you guys. So going into resonance with things can actually help you to find your path, but it doesn't always mean what you think it means. Yeah, it doesn't always mean the end of the rope, that like the end of your seeking. It just means that you know, whatever it is that comes in, that the input, the download, or whatever you want to call this, that you are experiencing, that can lead you to the next stepping stone. Yeah, so that's in my experience how this works, and we get into trouble with ourselves if we are making this like an all or nothing type of thing, because then we get too attached to the outcome, we get confused, and if we don't get the desired outcome and so forth. So qualifying our own desire is extremely important. And you guys have already sort of created beautiful sort of imagery here for all of us by trying to describe this and how you do this and what you found out. This training is about the systematic way of doing that, and you know, meaning that it's important to break it down into the steps so that we can put it back together as a whole, and then eventually sort of come up with our own rendering. Yeah, so not to make it magical or mystical, but to actually understand the steps. That's always the objective of all my teachings, yeah, is to teach you the steps and also why these steps are necessary and what they do, yeah, so that you can better see sort of the purpose of it. And well, one of the things that I mentioned in the invitation, it has to do with a vision board, and that's something I've mentioned a few times here in I know September, October, November a lot. And then naturally people do this at the end of the year, the beginning of the new year. And that is, you know, to create a vision board, to actually visualize it for you yourself, what it is that you want. And I've received a lot of questions about this. And obviously I teach this in my courses. So the energy course and the energy healer course and also the love integrity course have a lot to do with this. Like, how do you actually work this? How do you consciously manifest something that you envision first? And there's several processes involved with this, especially, not sure if it was Heather, was you, or Becky, you know, about sort of discerning, you know, like your desire, because there's also like our hopes and dreams, and they can sometimes be a bit fantastical and not very realistic. Yeah, so I do remember writing down in my diary all the things that I want to have by the time I'm 35. I remember that I was like 10 or so, and I wrote down all the things that I wanted to have when I was 35. And to be honest with you, a lot of that was items and things, and a lot of that did not come true. But the cool thing about it is, though, that it delivered sort of breadcrumbs. It delivered sort of certain feelings, and these feelings, yeah, that we just discussed, in the end, they are the ones that you need to pay attention to. They're the ones that you need to energize, okay, as they remind you of, you know, what your heart tells you, not your emotions, but your heart, as to like what truly matters to you, what really is important to you, what your preferences are. And for many of you also, sort of what some of the things are that you kind of feel that it's possible, but maybe you don't know the steps to get there, or you're afraid of these steps. Yeah, to give yourself that space to actually visualize that is what this exercise with making a vision board for yourself is for. Okay, and I wanted to show you my own vision board, and that of Jeff with his friendly permission, because we do this all the time. And the Because people ask me what it's supposed to look like. Well, in the old days, you know, what did we do? We did magazine clippings and pasted them on an actual board. Nowadays, you can just do this on your computer, really, and you make a mixture of, you know, I don't know, photos from your phone, maybe, like, you know, photos that remind you of this sort of utmost moment of excellence, you know, or you have maybe some other digital photos from your past that got you really close, where you got really, really close, or Google pictures. You know, it's not relevant if you have been in a certain place, or you know, in 3D or not. But if you can find pictures that get close to that, then you know, and especially if those are pictures maybe that have already you know, that are actually based on reality, then they have a little more power. So you see my vision board here, that's from like 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago now. And it's very interesting for me. Some of you know this, because so much has happened since then. And look, guys, I would recommend that you also add a like something like a mantra or something to your vision board, because it's not really supposed to be something that you know, you sort of hammer in, you know, like the picture of you in a bikini, you know, to lose some weight. No, it's more about reminding you of what you're truly in for here, what this is all about. And in my case, if I let me make this a little smaller. So okay, it's so big I couldn't get the whole thing on there. I divided my vision board into like 5 fundamental segments. School, which has to do with the school that you guys know that I am directing, lifestyle, business, and family. And then in the middle, kind of like what connects it all, that is like who I truly am. And you will find pictures here that are, some of them are pictures that are real, that this is me meditating. I think it was in Colorado, Red Rock, at a summer solstice event. I'm not sure, but it was one of our annual summer solstice events. This is a place in Iceland that I have taken a photo of that has given me the chills to my bones when I first arrived there, for reasons that I cannot explain here. This would go too far. Those of you who come to Iceland, I will actually get you to this place and show you why. Because there was such a strong resonance. And then you see pictures here that are very personal, things that don't mean anything to you, like cupcakes, you know, and a little high noon cake tray and bridge. These things don't mean anything to you. These are very, very personal. This is all, you know, those are all things that connect to me with my deepest you know, things I just love doing. Yeah, so my goal, and this is how you tune into your true heart's desire, guys, is to do what I love and to love what I do. Everything that I do, everything that I say, everything that I engage with, every person that I surround myself with needs to be in alignment with me, needs to be in alignment to what I love. It sounds a bit selfish when you say it this way, but if you only knew, you know, what this really means, because if 2 people come together who both do this, yeah, there's a lot of accountability and self-responsibility in this. And when 2 people come together that really know what they want, it's extremely powerful. Yeah, manifestation becomes extremely powerful together. And you know, these things here that you see on my vision board, guys. For example, this here is that's a Google picture, the picnic thing. And that's obviously Jeff and I. But this is like some random people. And it wasn't about the people. This picture is about sort of a picnic situation that I can imagine myself in with my grandchildren, you know, I don't know, like in 10 or 15 years down the road. And it's the feeling that I wanted to capture about that. Yeah, and the same with, you know, with the cake and the espresso and the piano and, you know, somebody watering the plants. At the time when I did this, our school, I thought I was going to call the school Energy Kids, and you know, I was looking at buildings, and today it's called Master Tree Academy, and it's a completely different building, much bigger than this one. At the time, I could not imagine that. I could not imagine that. And if I did an update today, then you would see that some of these things would have become more concrete, and some of them are still out there, but the more precise you are in getting the feeling onto something like imagery, the more aligned your manifestation efforts become. So this is Jeff's, and Jeff has done it a little differently, but similar in a way. You know, and you see things here that they symbolize something for him. And this is very, very important that you do this for yourself, that you find out what these things are that you truly love. And there are so many questions. Melly, I want to thank you for sending in a question up front. That is so almost typical, okay, for you know, like our true, when we think about our true heart desire. What if I don't know what I want? What if I don't know the steps to get there? All right, and we talked about the steps to get there. The steps to get there reveal themselves as you go through these resonances, through these breadcrumbs, as you go. But the first most fundamental step is to actually communicate this to yourself, what it is that you love, what it is that you want. It doesn't matter if you get there. Actually, Cindy, you mentioned something that I liked. Oh no, it was Julianne, it was you. You know, you wanted to drive a car, and you wanted that freedom, you know, that that you experienced that maybe here and there, you know, with that comes with driving a car, and you focused on that. Now, to be honest, to be fair, on the day of the driver's license test, from here to there, it's not really that big of a step anymore. Okay, and like you convinced yourself, you coached yourself through that. You know, even if you fail, well, then you do it again. I don't think that there's a limitation as to how many times you can actually do driver's license tests. So either way, on a long enough timeline, you would have gotten your driver's license down the road. The problem is that most of you don't actually believe that it's possible, and that you kind of sabotage that to begin with through your inner schisms. Okay, you don't need to know how to get there. You don't need to know what the concrete steps or what the all the different elements are that are going to lead you there. At the time when I did my vision board, there was nothing there, like as far as the school is concerned, you know, that resembled anything like a plan or steps. Okay, and here we are, you know, I'm a real school now. You know, so these things need to be trained. You need to train yourself to allow yourself things, okay, and that happens through this communication, through imagery. And remember that imagery is not the same as images. So when we get too fixated on the outcome, you know, then fears step in, and you know, we become too rigid. It's best if you work with placeholders. And guess why a true heart's desire is called true heart's desire? It has to do with the place in you where that placeholder actually exists. It's the container, the manifestation space, and that is your heart. So your heart is the place that actually holds, you know, your, yeah, the object of your love, or the, you know, what it is that you want to love. And in the beginning, we think it's something outside of ourselves. Down the road, we'll discover that it is actually something inside ourselves, you know, the Grail. Yeah, the Grail Quest is a beautiful analogy for this sort of false identity and seeking outside of ourselves. Yeah. So anyone who wants to study this, and the poetry around this, it's very, very beautiful. The Arthurian Grail story is very, very beautiful, and has a lot of truth in it. Yeah. So that's something, if you want to like dive a little deeper into meaning and purpose, yeah, then seek that kind of literature. That also the classics, you know, like Odyssey and so forth, you know. There's lots and lots of truths about the human nature and how to actually do these kind of things, like love and truth and freedom, etc. Yeah. So why do we pick the wrong things? And that is fundamentally why we are so afraid of starting something without knowing how we can do this. So if you keep this in your heart, and you allow your heart to basically hold that void, yeah, that you have, then you don't really need to be afraid of picking the wrong things. Picking the wrong things happens because you start identifying with things, and then your mind sort of starts to latch on, and your ego delivers the emotions that make you believe that you have to have it. 85% of us pick the wrong things, or better say, we all 85% of what we're picking is actually wrong, in the sense of that it doesn't actually even resemble what our true heart's desire is. It's just something that we think we need, or that our parents told us, or on whatever level, yeah, physical, emotional, social, that sort of transpired to us. It's something kind of externalized, and that's why we pick the wrong things. There's also psychological aspects and karmic aspects why we picked the seemingly wrong things. So wrong is a word that when you tap into your higher consciousness, to be avoided, because wrong doesn't actually exist. Yeah, so there's a learning experience in everything that you do, that you choose, and your job is to make conscious choices. Yeah, it's the unconscious choices that get you into trouble, and psychology can sometimes be part of that. Because if we've had certain traumatic experiences, or you know, like something that we were trying to avoid, or something that we're trying, you know, then we are making a lot of unconscious choices that are supposed to, you know, sort of make it so. Well, most of it is about avoiding pain or seeking pleasure. That's our unconscious manifestation. That's the level of physical and emotional desire. Yeah. And that's why we pick the wrong things. And please, guys, we have 5 minutes left, and we're just going to go through the questions here, most commonly asked questions in regards to our heart's desire and why it's so difficult. Just a quick question: did anyone here present here actually make a vision board themselves? Has any one of you worked on a vision board before, or, you know, currently? All right, two of you. That's wonderful, guys. You don't have to share it, okay? Because we can't really share screens here with the software. But you know, can I ask those of you who have worked with the vision board or are doing this, what your experiences were when you worked with vision board on a level of higher consciousness? Heather, do you mind sharing, because you just recently did this? You don't have to share any details of your vision board, but just experiences that you had in the process of doing it.
Sure, I can.
Nice.
I think the first thing I'm going to point out is that I found it very interesting that my true heart's desire, if we are going to say that, it actually wasn't what I always thought it was. You know, I would put something on my vision board, and then I would realize, you know what, that's the old me. The new me, the me today, I don't want that anymore. And so I would take it off, and then I would put on something that was more of a match for me today. So I found that very interesting. I also found it a little bit challenging, just because I wanted to be able to not necessarily put a stop to the vision. So I just allowed myself to realize that, hey, I can always do another one later, or just keep adding and subtracting to the one that I'm working on as I move forward in life. And I found that to be an obstacle for a while that I worked through, and finally came to that conclusion.
Actually, you know, this is the part I really like about doing it on the computer, because it feels more fluid, you know, as to, like Linda was just sharing here, she started cutting out from magazines in preparation for the session, which is great, Linda, by the way. So awesome, you know, just engaging in the process brings up a lot of stuff, like Heather just shared. Sorry, Heather, I interrupted you, but I know what you mean, Heather, with it you don't want it to be limiting. And you don't want it to be that way, but you know, by trying to find the right pictures or the feelings that, or pictures that represent our feelings, there's something in that process. Would you agree? Like in the process of finding something that matches our feelings. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and just to try and say something to that, it's almost like getting to know myself better on a deeper level, instead of just on a surface level. Oh yeah, I want this for myself. Oh yeah, I want that for myself.
The dream kitchen
No.
and the dream car, and, right? Like all the having, owning, getting things, right? That's all superficial. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Indeed it is. And to get past that and really get to the root, get to the fundamental depth of what I truly want in my life, because it's we're on a time frame here. Yeah, we can't deny that. And so it matters to me. And it boils down to the intentionality and what you brought forward, to really focus on always trying to work towards only being, doing, thinking, and feeling what you truly want to be, think, feel, and do as a person. So I found that rather beautiful.
Thank you sharing. Thank you for sharing, Heather. I really, I mean, this really hits home with me, you know, when you said that you got to know yourself a little better. And I think that if you keep that in mind, guys, if you let go of this idea, you know, to having to do a vision board because the teacher said so, you know, like a homework assignment or something, but if you see it more as a way to get to get to know yourself better, and to allow that to be a more fluid process. Yeah, don't get too fixated on you know, just having it sort of be one of the things that you know, the must-haves in order to successfully manifest. No, this is a process. It's a process. It's not a product. It's a process. Yeah. That there's many more questions, and you know, like for example, we've already answered a bunch of them. Is the towards desire like a wish list? Well, Heather and everybody know now who has shared, kind of confirmed for us that well, sure, you can start it out as a wish list, but you'll get to see in the process, when you actually engage with this process, that it's not the same. It's not like, you know, hopes and dreams and I wish I had, you know, and the lottery win and stuff like that. It's the more authentic it becomes, the more congruent it becomes, that the more it resonates with who you truly are today. Yeah, that's also an important factor. Who you are now, not who you were when you were 15 and you wanted, you know, this and this and this and that. No, who you are not right now. Yeah, the last 2 years have all they've all done something to us. They forced all of us to review and recapitulate. And like Heather just said, guess you said we're on a timeline or something like that, right? That's important to remember. Yeah, that you know, you have to make it about, or you have to make it as authentic as you can about right now. What if I don't know if what I want? That is a big problem. It's probably the biggest problem, as I mentioned in the beginning. Because what happens to someone who doesn't know where they want to go? They will never arrive. And even if they did arrive, they wouldn't even know that they've arrived. So that's something that, you know, I hope to serve with this training call, you know, to help you in that inner discernment and calibration process. What's the difference between hopes and dreams and true heart's desire? Well, I mean, we've already answered this. Hopes and dreams are magical. They're not really based on, you know, sort of what you truly want. If anything, you know, hopes and dreams are often linked to these emotional and physical and mental desires, yeah, as in like a drive that's supposed to avoid a certain negative feeling, or that is supposed to you know, serve with more pleasure, but that is not the same as happiness and fulfillment. Where can I find confirmation? That was at the beginning when we talked about, you know, where do we feel this? And Cindy mentioned that she feels it in her heart, and then she described it. So it's an overall feeling, but that's the inner resonance, guys. That's when we are congruent, meaning that, you know, if all of who we are matches up with what we want, there is a sort of a ping that happens in us, yeah, that informs us about it. The only thing we need to be careful with is that we often have a tendency to take this then and to make it special and to overinterpret it, to see everything as a sign, for example. It's a huge big ego trap, guys. Huge. Whether it's angel numbers or master builder numbers or whatever, not that there's no validity in numerology and stuff like that, but you got to be careful with these kind of things. Yeah, do not make them special and make everything a sign. Okay, that becomes fantastical then. How do I know I'm on the right path? That kind of goes hand in hand with that, because the more calibrated you are, the more you know yourself, and the more you know this, that have a good reference feeling for this inner resonance, okay, the easier it is for you to tell. Some people ask if we actually even have free will, and you know, if this isn't all sort of destiny anyway. And it's something that we covered last month in our Manifesting Destiny recording that I will send with the recording for this one here. So how is our free will constructed? Is it even true? And these kind of questions, like is there good karma, bad karma, old or new karma, and so forth. We have discussed them in the last webinar. And well, what if you're wrong? Well, I guess if you're wrong, then you have to try again, right? And I have a little bit of a sort of sarcastic saying about this, but all we can really do, guys, is try our best. And at the end of our life, we will all die trying our best. Okay, and that is all we can do, and that is the most we can do. So our highest potential, guys, is trying our best. There is no such thing as wrong. There is none. And yes, how can we get support? Is also something that I mentioned in the last workshop. You know, there's alignments obviously to outer energies as well, and that can have to do with the simple things like communication, like how am I presenting myself, how am I expressing myself to others, and you know, how easy it is for them to align to us. Yeah, but there's also a spiritual support. There's even a support in collective energies sometimes, which I, as you know, report about. And then there's support that we can also ask from our higher power, and that is something that I mentioned last. Yeah, so I talked about this in the last webinar. There's something that is linked to your vision board. The more clear you are about your vision board, the more easy it will be for you to get support in the spirit realm, because the only way, you know, the spirit realm really processes things is through imagery, not images, but imagery. And imagery is basically like how, you know, like a picture and the feeling that comes with it. Does this make sense? Yeah. And so that's what I would recommend to you. Again, here we have all these different layers of manifestation, just like how we have the same layers of desire. And here, just real quick, how you can systematically ask yourself if what it is that you are striving for, or you know, the direction that you're headed. Yeah, how you can double check this. I have added like another level to this. This has to do with the behavioral here. So the mental, behavioral, social, moral, and spiritual, they sometimes sort of grip into another. Yeah, especially the social, moral, and spiritual, which is very clear when you look at religion, for example. Okay, so I wanted to differentiate this here just a little bit, to give you a little bit extra parameters for your, you know, sort of clarity process, for your conscious manifestation process. When you look at physical manifestation, you're looking at is this healthy? Is this sustainable? Those are the fundamental questions for you to calibrate your own desire. You have to make sure that it's actually true. Because if it's not healthy and if it's not sustainable, it doesn't matter how much your ego likes the idea, it's not good for you. So why would it be something that you should desire from your heart? Your heart will refuse that, because if it's not sustainable, if it's not healthy for you, you know, then it's fundamentally self-destructive, and then the spirit won't really support that either. Emotionally, what's congruent with me? What's desirable? This is also similar to like what's attractive to me, what attracts me. But it is a relatively low level, guys. So understand that this has nothing to do with higher love or twin soul or soulmate or anything like that. Yeah. What's congruent with you is something that, or you know, also what's more similar to you is automatically more desirable. But as many of you know, also what's familiar to you is more desirable, and that's where your ego can get into trouble, because if you grew up, like say, in very toxic conditions, then toxicity will feel very familiar to you and will give you a false sense of security. So this is the problem with that. Yeah, why you can't just go with these lower levels of desire. If you manifest on lower levels of desire, you will not get to happiness, fulfillment, or healing. Yeah, you can get to a certain level, you can make lots of money and stuff, but and maybe not have lasting relationships. Yeah. Mental behavioral, you have to ask yourself, is this acceptable? Is this reasonable? Yes, you hear me say sometimes, no matter how you twist or turn it, it's not okay what this person says or does. Yeah, so it's a bit of common sense too, but it's very much so really based on sort of what we for ourselves deem as acceptable, and this also has to do with boundaries. Socially, morally, you know, the question is this right? Is this appropriate? Yeah, because there's obviously different, and the legal system knows this, there's different situations and circumstances that change the context of certain things, even desires under certain conditions. You know, it's very cool, you know, to have goals that link you in with making as much money as you want. For example, if you know, you're like myself right now, like a nonprofit school, and you want to make as much money as you can, so that you can give out as many scholarships as you can. Yeah, and that's a completely different context from you want to make as much money as you can, including stealing money from others, you know, and taking things away from others because you don't care. So what's right, what's appropriate does need to be investigated if you do this systematically. Spiritually, the question, what is the meaning for me? is there high expression in that? That is tricky for most people, but because they confuse, you know, signs and synchronicities and stuff like that with meaning. This is not the same as meaning, guys. Okay, this is something where your mind, yeah, when you see synchronicities, when you see signs and everything, that's where your mind fills in the gaps. It's literally fantasizing. And that said, I don't think that synchronicities and so forth are untrue. I experience a lot of synchronicities in my life, but I wouldn't call them synchronicities or signs. I actually felt a very clear reference feeling, very clear resonance inside of me that confirmed to me that what I was experiencing right now is important, that I need to be very present, that I need to pay attention to what is going on. Yeah, because I know myself really well. And the last one, the energetic or the etheric resonance, that is something that needs to bring balance, that needs to bring healing, harmony, and growth. So this is something that you can ask yourself, you know, does this, some of you ask, like, you know, what would my love do? Yeah, love is a very high vibratory energy or frequency, bringing in, you know, growth, bringing in expansion, and with it also healing and abundance. Yeah, but that requires you to have a good sort of reference feeling for these different resonances, and that's not always easy, you know, if you haven't done this kind of systematic consciousness work. Yeah. Yeah, guys, this concludes our training call. It's a wonderful topic, and you know, after an hour and a half, you know, you kind of get full in your head, so it doesn't really make sense to go farther. But I do need you to just go home with the understanding that your true heart's desire is probably something much more complex than you think it is, and probably something completely different from what it is, like Heather shared with us, and that there are ways to get there if you can let go of, you know, sort of these the secret, or you know, Tony Robbins, or you know, these kind of publications that make it a matter of willpower. While it is not entirely wrong, there's one very, very important ingredient missing, and that is your inner ability to tell truth. Yeah, and knowing yourself, knowing your ego, knowing your own ego traps, knowing your shadow, knowing your hidden intentions, and ultimately making the unconscious conscious. That is what we're here for, guys. And so in our, you know, sort of life's journey, we hopefully become better and better at it as we go. Yeah. And if we experience things that don't work out the way we wanted them, well, then I hope this talk encouraged you to just try again. Yeah, and maybe modify some things, go into feedback. Yeah. So yeah, guys, thank you so much for the participation. These kind of things are things that I teach here within the Sacred Self-Healing program. You know, it weaves through all of the steps, particularly the 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21st step. If you want to go deeper into this, you know, in regards to relationships, we have the Love Integrity course with Jeff and I. And if you want to go into the deeper aspects of the energetic elements of that, yeah, learning how to really clear your perceptions and know what you're seeing is coming out of you and not sort of stuff that you pick up from the collective, then the energy course, it's just called energy course, could be interesting for you as well. Yeah, and obviously the sessions that we have on Friday, 9 p.m. is the energetic tune-up session for March with the personal reading, and where I clear your energies with these March energies. And then we have a shadow work marathon next week. We don't do this very often. That is a very cool occurrence. So guys, go to my website and see all these events and links and more info there. Love you guys. See you. Yeah. in 2 days at the energy update on YouTube and Skype.